Word on the street regarding health is hydrate, so why not get some other benefits too? The new word is live, spelled L-I-V. So get out and live life well with products and systems made with new technology that you simply add to or take with water. You hydrate, lose weight, cleanse your system, gain energy, and it is all natural. Go to mylivezone.com/DAP. Live, L-I-V, zone.com/DAP. Well, as part of our HPU preview, if you will, we got head coach of the men's basketball team, head coach DARREN VORDERBRUEGGE. And, Coach, first of all, thanks for joining us. And I'm going to start off with this question because it's always pandemic related in terms of college sports. But I can't imagine for you guys how, because of your resources compared to Division I, you're already kind of limited on that. HPU is in Hawaii, which is already hard to recruit. Did recruiting get hit kind of the hardest in terms of level of difficulty when it comes to impact of the pandemic?
Well, that's a great question. I really think that HPU, I hate to say this, is almost at an advantage because, one of the first impacts that recruiting had was you could not go and recruit off of, they made it a quiet period. So coaches couldn't go out and watch. And they also made it so that student athletes could not do official visits. Well, we didn't do a lot of that to start with. And to a certain degree, it kind of leveled the playing field. It is so expensive for us to fly over for a weekend of AAU basketball in Anaheim, and even more expensive to get to Denver, whereas at all of those events, there are so many coaches who get in their Camrys and drive for 4 or 5 hours and watch those, and it costs them a tank of gas and a Wendy's hamburger. And so that, in that sense, we were kind of used to, hey, we got to do more on video. We for years have not been doing many official visits, but been Zooming with parents. And, we used to call it Skype.
Yeah.
But so I think in a sense that played as a little bit of an advantage, or at least leveled the playing field.
And I got to talk to you too, is that last season, although as weird as it was the way it ended, it was the first year of having your own facility, the Shark Tank, which was the old St. Francis School gym. So I know there was a lot of excitement to that. Did it seem a little anticlimactic in a way, the way the season ended? Because there was all the excitement, having crowds there, practices. You didn't have to do as much work logistically in terms of coordinating practice, which that's how I got to know you. I used to work at Palama Settlement. You would practice there. Then you had games at either Blaisdell or Moanalua. Suddenly, oh my gosh, we don't have to do all that stuff. And then pandemic hits and it kind of ends the season, cuts it short a little bit, and then you have more work to do, I guess, in terms of dealing with all that. Was it a little anticlimactic the way it ended last year?
Yeah, it was so surreal in so many ways. And you and I'm glad you bring it up, Dave, but we met years ago at Palama Settlement, and a shout out to that terrific organization and all the good that they do. It was, I don't know what words to use, invigorating, energizing to get our own facility. People snicker and roll their eyes when I tell them about us. Okay, we're loading up the basketballs to go to college basketball practice, and we're having to take our, the equipment we use and the rebound rim and waiting until the line dancers get off the court that have rented it till we can get on. And it wasn't real glamorous, as you and I both know.
Oh yeah.
But not to be concerned about the glamour, just the freedom and to get on the court, to get extra time for the young men, to have your emblem painted on the court and feel like you've got a home court. It was so good. The weird part about last year for me was kind of unique in the sense of our women had an incredible year last year. The HPU Lady Sharks had, I think, one loss overall. So they were one of the top seeds in they were the number one seed, and we got to host regionals. So my birthday is March 13th. I think that was the day, as you kind of hear that day referred to. And I remember being in the gym, and the night before, Thursday night, they had canceled the NBA. And that Friday, we were in the gym, and there were 8 teams coming in to have practice that day. And then the next day start the national tournament, I can remember we were in full court mode. At that point, the men's season was over, and I was just trying to support our women's team and our administration to host the regional. And I remember saying that day, I'm not right very often in life. So whenever I am, I remember it. I remember coming in and saying, are these teams going to practice today? And somebody said, yeah, the tournament starts tomorrow. And I said, how can the NBA cancel and yet we're going to be allowed to play basketball, Division II women? And so sure enough, we got into about the middle of the first practice and the world stopped turning, and it was just so, the big thing I felt was those girls. I mean, there were teams all over that had really good years, but the personal experience of knowing those young women and Coach Reed thinking, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that just got pulled out from under them.
No, Coach, I gotta ask, because I know that it's tough to do scheduling, whatever level you're on, whatever gender you're coaching, but to have a lot of, say, your D1 friends that have been having to basically schedule on the fly, and now things are getting either canceled or postponed, teams are pausing activities. What have you heard from other D1 coaches about just how tough it is to patchwork a schedule before conference?
I think most coaches that I've talked to have taken a deep breath and said, okay, we want to really be ready. We want to get our team as competitive as they can be. And coaches only have one gear, and that is let's practice and get as good as we can get. But you do have to take a deep breath and say, we hope we can play whatever modified conference schedule has been provided, and the rest is kind of icing on the cake. Now, I'm not talking to Bill Self and Mike Krzyzewski and Tom Izzo. I'm talking more to, what would be called mid-major, low major, and other D2 coaches who've kind of taken that step back and said, what we can do, we can do. And it's so unique because for the first time ever, we're very regionalized, or almost 50 independent states. Like, okay, well, these California schools, they can't do this. They can't eat outside at a restaurant. And in Kansas, it's hard to find somebody wearing a mask in places. So everything's back. It's all over the map. And you're, the whole thing that, a big part for Hawaii, again, for UH and Hilo, Chaminade, and ourselves are people don't want to fly. I mean, right now, it's always been expensive to fly, but now there's this added stigma of you going to your administration at your college and saying, we want to load up on an airplane and fly somewhere to go play a basketball game. Well, the thing that a lot of people don't think about there too is, let's say you do fly. Let's say that we would fly somewhere or a team would come here. What happens if someone tests positive? And then is that person, you got to get a hotel room, and imagine us going over to play a game in California and someone tests positive. Well, you can't get that person on a plane and bring them home. They would need a 14-day quarantine, and there's an expense, and then who stays back and supervises. So what a mess.
It really is a mess. And for what is very tough with the Pac West is that most of the schools are in California, and there's, the situation like you talked about where, certain states are acting, differently than others, but it's just tough because you have a lot of schools in Northern California and in Southern California, but it's also been something for you guys where when you go and travel, you're playing 3, 4, 5 games per road trip. Do you get a sense of that being what's going to continue to happen for this shortened season?
My feeling right now, the information I'm getting, what's being seriously considered, is that maybe the Pac West will play in pods, and this is all tentative, but I think it's the lead idea going around right now, that the Northern California teams would play each other, the Southern California teams would play each other, and the Hawaii teams would play each other. I'm still mad at BYU Hawaii for cutting athletics, because that cuts us down to 3 schools.
No kidding.
But that we would play each other too many times, and then maybe at the end of that, try to evaluate, hey, is there a road trip that can be taken? Because now you're talking maybe the end of February, early March, if we can, cobble some pod games together in January and February, and then look at a trip. I think they're probably talking about maybe the winners of each pod, or who would be determined a champion, getting together and looking at a conference tournament. But I think we've all learned that you've got to make plans right now and then kind of wait a week or 2 weeks and see where you're at again. We've seen that just in politics, in opening up Hawaii for tourism. We set the date and then we moved it, and then you set another date and you reevaluate. So I think that is the idea that we'll try right now.
We're talking with head coach of HPU men's basketball, DARREN VORDERBRUEGGE. And, Coach, as you just mentioned, to the fact that there's a lot of basically a wait and see, a lot of uncertainty in everything. You can plan for this, but there's always have to be a plan B, plan C kind of ready on the table. I often wondered, as a coach, this must really test your skills in terms of motivation. I mean, there's all the X's and O's, there's a game prep, but when you have this element of uncertainty that is really extending, you got to motivate your players and keep that cohesion there, because you can't tell them anything. Hey, Coach, when are we playing? I don't know. Hey, Coach, when is our first road trip? I have no idea. So has that really tested the element of motivation for you?
It has, to a certain degree, and that's insightful, because you're right. Young men want to play games. That's what the effort is for. What I've also learned, two things. Number one, we got such a late start. Throughout September and pretty much October, we were not allowed to do much. At one point in October, this is going to sound like a joke with no punchline, we were allowed to work 4 student athletes at a time outdoors at a park without a basketball. So that was our first entry into me even being able to have contact with them. So
oh, wow.
We're over at Pu'unui Park doing defensive slides and sit-ups and high knees. It's like, what? But my point, Dave, is that because of that, when we were able to get on the court with mask into full practice mode, I've continued to remind them weekly, hey, we might not know when our first game is, and we might not be suiting up, but we're not at the park doing defensive slides. So let's make the most of it at this point. And then the second thing is, it's reiterated to me, young men love to play basketball and they want to compete. So we've looked for ways for them to compete and keep score during practice and things like that. So, and I think we're going to have a game with UH before Christmas break. And we're really excited about that. Just a chance to, we know they're going to be really good, and all the money's going to be on them, and that's how it should be. That's why they're D1 and we're D2. But hey, that just a chance to play a game is so valuable.
Not that we condone how people spend their money on certain activities, right, Coach?
That's right.
Coach, I got one more for you. I'm not sure how much of the NBA bubble you got to see, but I just wanted to just kind of get your thoughts on what you saw from watching the bubble, and also if your team was put into a bubble-like situation, whether it was just in the Hawaii pod or if, say, the Pac West kind of relocated to a different venue and just kind of had like a bubble format of a conference season, just to see how you think your team could perform in a bubble-like scenario.
Now, I watched quite a bit of that. There wasn't a lot of other sports options on TV during that time, but it was good basketball. The Heat, the Celtics, I really enjoyed their style of play. I thought they both guarded, and it was fascinating. You know, one observation, I kind of thought that you could sense that the teams were not as tired. There was no travel between games. Everybody was going back to their room right after the game that they were comfortable with. I mean, it wasn't back to their house, but I was fascinated also by that they were, you know, you would compete against somebody and maybe even talk some trash and have some negative energy, and then have to go sit by them at the pool or run into them in the hallway. And that was just something you never thought you'd see at that level. You know, we have, I don't know how my guys would perform in that situation, but we are in a bubble of sorts. I mean, I just lecture them every day, guys. You understand, if one of you tests positive, we're done for 2 weeks. I mean, I'm pretty sure that something along those lines will happen. So continuing to encourage them to just lay low and be below the radar. I think Hawaii's a pretty good place for that right now, based on the other people I'm talking to. There's more large outdoor gatherings, and there's a little more aggressive attitude in some states. And here, you know, our rates are relatively good, but I think we would bubble if we were on the road. I mean, we've already talked about, you know, we wouldn't ride a public transportation to the airport. We'd only be our team. We'd try to sit together on the airplane. We'd get to the hotel. We would not go out for meals, order them all in, which is just bizarre. But if that's what you got to do to get some games in, then that's what we would do.
Hey, last thing, Coach. How are you guys? What's the protocols you guys are following now? Like, how often are you and your players either being tested and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, we're tested 3 times a week. We were once a week for a while, and now that we've gotten into the heart of the season, we are tested 3 times a week on campus. We do a saliva test and mail that to the mainland and get the results back in usually less than 48 hours. We're at the gym. There's no interaction with other teams. When the women's team practices or volleyball would practice before us, there's a grace period with a protocol of cleaning and desanitizing. We have people coming in and cleaning the restrooms multiple times a day.
Wow.
We're all wearing masks, the players and the coaches, throughout practice. So it's a different time, but we're making it work.
Well, I tell you what, first of all, thanks for taking the time to join with us. I know you probably got a practice coming up. And if anything, I think your players are going to be much more conditioned having to run around in a doggone mask the whole time. That must test the conditioning and the breathing of all your players.
You know, I get worn out and catch myself gasping for breath just from yelling at them. So I know they got to be tired from running at it.
Well, Coach, good luck to you in that in your this coming season. We look forward to it. We look forward to hopefully that game with UH coming up. But thanks again for taking the time with us.
Thanks, Dave and Tiff. Appreciate you guys having me on. Take care.
Thanks, Coach.